In the early 20th century, America had open borders. Between 1850 and 1913, 30 million immigrants entered the United States. Of these, approximately 300,000 were Lithuanians. They were coming from the country of Lithuania, fleeing poor economic conditions, Russian oppression, famine, and in some cases, just seeking a better life. About half of the arrivals were illiterate. Many were not even identified as Lithuanians, as Lithuania was under Russian control until 1918. In many cases, they were listed as Polish.
They came here who could not read and write. Can you imagine? And the Lithuanians could not read and write not because they were not brilliant, but because they didn't want to learn Russian. They didn't want to learn in Russian. The church was all in Polish. So the God spoke Polish, and the pagan, which was Lithuanian, God would not understand it. So here was the decision. You learned Lithuanian at your mother's knee in the house. You went to school, which they didn't want, the parents didn't want you to learn that Russian because it was such oppressive slavery. And the church, you learned your Polish, but just for the church. And here we had this thing. And so they ran away from the army. Many of them came here, but they came with Polonized names because when there was a marriage or a birth certificate, it was written in Polish. And so when they brought these names, they were Polish names. And many of them changed to American names because I really now for the first time understand why the change of names, because it wasn't their name. It was Polonized, it was Russianized, and so they changed it to an American name. And this is the way we have many names this time.
Many of the first Lithuanians settled in Pennsylvania and went to work in the mines. They settled in Pennsylvania towns such as Frackville, Mahanoy City, New Philadelphia, and Shenandoah. By the late 1890s, Lithuanians represented 25% of Shenandoah's population. The area became the hub of Lithuanian first-wave immigrant activity. To this day, that area's population includes many with Lithuanian ancestry. The descendants continue to identify with their Lithuanian roots. Mining was hard, back-breaking work. Lithuanian miners had a strong work ethic and recognized when conditions were unfair. Lithuanian workers played an important role in the growth of the United Mine Workers Union as well as the Amalgamated Garment Workers Union. The first Lithuanians arrived in Rochester in 1890. By 1905, there were over 400 Lithuanians in Rochester, mostly single men coming from the mines of Pennsylvania looking for better jobs.
We're here today in Jamestown, Rhode Island with Birutė Butrimas. Her ancestors were actually one of the founders of the Rochester Lithuanian community. So Birutė, do you know anything about your ancestors?
I actually did not know any of that until you told me, and I dug out that one book and I read and I went, oh my goodness, I never knew that. So
okay, well,
I didn't.
I'm going to just tell you a little bit about who they were, and I'm sorry, but I do have to read this. Birutė's relative, Adomas Butrimas, was recognized as one of the original founders of the Rochester Lithuanian community. It is speculated that he arrived in Rochester in 1897, and he married the very first Lithuanian female that arrived in Rochester, who was called Barbara Stulpinaitė. He became a member of the St. Peter and Paul organization because early on they organized themselves in different Catholic-oriented organizations. He suggested that they spearhead the building of the Lithuanian Catholic Church, which, as you know, was the focus of a lot of Lithuanian cultural activity. He and his brother Vincentas Butrimas are listed as being key figures in soliciting donations from the local Lithuanians towards the creation of what later became St. George's Church and Parish.
St. George's Church became the center of a thriving Lithuanian religious, cultural, and social community.
The Lithuanian parishioners built the church.
We had to demolish that property and build a church there in the corner.
That's interesting.
St. George's built a church right there in the corner.
Yeah. Oh, as far back as I can remember, I remember them being very active, the ladies, and making dinners. They seem to always have chicken dinners that the ladies put together. And I still remember them taking all the roasters over. They prepared them in St. George's kitchen, and they had like a brigade that took it over to Connecticut's bakery for baking. So I just remember all that.
Tell us about your parents. Did they come from Lithuania, or were they born here?
No, they came from Lithuania.
When did they come?
Oh, way back in 1926, maybe? No, before that. But we moved over we lived on Dayton Street where I was born. Dayton, which is off Hudson Avenue. Because this was all farmland out here. They didn't have this all built yet. And
did they speak Lithuanian at home?
yes. When we came home, we had to speak Lithuanian at the table when we ate or anything like that. And that's where we learned the language a lot better than we did in school. Because in school, we just talked with the kids and stuff. We had Lithuanian classes in school, but they didn't do too much for us. Well, my mother was a tailor. She worked at Timely Clothes, Ricky Freeman. So my dad worked at Bauschalam. When that's where he spent a whole lifetime at Bauschalam, working there.
Were they graduates of high school or grammar school? Or?
No, when they came over, I think they didn't go to any school here in the United States, that I recall. They just worked. We used to live on Hudson Avenue over, my dad owned a block on Hudson Avenue near Warsaw, Watkin Terrace. Yeah, on Hudson, not too far from the church. And my mother was a tailor. She worked at a tailor shop. My dad at Bauschalam. We were just kids, my sister and I.
My mother was born in 1910 in Shenandoah, Pennsylvania. A year later, they came to Rochester. I don't know why. My mother did go to Holy Redeemer School, though. And she was pulled out of school when she was 11 to go back to Lithuania, where my grandfather had a farm. My grandmother and grandfather were both farmers. And my dad came over to Rochester in 1919. And he worked at East Rochester Piano Works. And then for the rest of his life, he was worked in a foundry at American Laundry Machine Company. My mother was a stay-at-home mom till my brother and I got into high school. And she went to work for Xerox, and she retired from Xerox.
Did they speak Lithuanian?
I went to St. George's School not knowing any English. It was only Lithuanian spoken at home.
So when I went to St. George's School, the school was downstairs and the church was upstairs in the hall.
Right.
My grandparents, I think first my grandfather, Jonas Jokšas, came. Ponas Valerius Vitkus sponsored him, and I guess stayed with him until he got established. My grandmother came, Ursula Butkaitė, And they were married here in Rochester, and I guess they were the first couple to be married in the first church, the old, what we had as the parish hall when I knew it. So that was November 8th, 1910. They were married there, and I think they owned the house, the property behind where the new church is. They owned that house, and when it was time to build the new church, they gave, or I don't know if they gave or they sold the property to, for St. George's Church. My grandfather fled Lithuania so he wouldn't have to go into the Red Army. My grandmother, I think the families knew each other. She came, I think her family wanted just a better life for her. I remember my mom saying that her mom, would talk about how they hid their books underneath the floorboards, and they had to talk Russian in public. So those were a couple of things that she was there. And my mother remembered a Russian lullaby that her mother said she knew and, would sing to her sometimes. Of course, she would, in Lithuanian as well. But, they were, they were scared to talk in Lithuanian and to read or, do anything like that. Well, my grandfather, Jonas, was very active in the St. Peter and Paul Society. And my mother said something about he was the treasurer at some point in the building of the new church. So I'm not sure if it was the exact time or before or what. That is something I never really researched at the parish, in the records. And my grandmother was involved in the choir. They used to do dinners and all that kind of stuff. I know she used to cook. My grandfather was a businessman. He was a tailor. He became a tailor, and he built the building that's across from the new church. And on one side he had his tailor shop, and my grandmother was the seamstress with him. And on the other side was his ice cream parlor. And they lived upstairs. So my mother always remembers him being in suits and carrying his pocket watch, and he had his roll-top desk. And, she would sit and, play with his papers with him, and because he was always conducting some kind of business, taking care of something. So.
Pamela, her daughter, and her sister Barbara Miller continue to be active in the Knights of Lithuania, a cultural charity supporting Lithuanian causes in America and Lithuania.
Both myself and my daughter Sophie are members, and they hold a convention every year, as they always did. And we have Mass. We have, of course, our business meetings. And we do cultural things. We usually have like a cultural night. And there's some that are DPs as well. And they come from all over the United States. And the convention is at a different city every year. And the members are active at various levels. There's some that are associated with people in Lithuania and work to help them. We have a couple of charities that we support. One is Our Lady of Shilova Foundation, and that is to help support, an awareness of Our Lady of Shilova We have events at the National Basilica in Washington, D.C. We have the St. Casimir's Guild, which helps fund the Lithuanian Seminary in Rome. Many people are very generous.
Rochester Lithuanian Algird Bertman recalls the early days of St. George's Church and School. His memories trace back to the building of St. George's Parish Church.
I was only 3 years old at the time, and I was surprised that I could remember that being built, because the cornerstone says 1934. And it started out with a vineyard, and they were clearing the land, and there was a horse-drawn stone boat, which is like a big tire rim with a couple handlebars on it, and they were rolling these big boulders across the lot there, and I was really fascinated by that. But then the next thing I can remember was the actual church being built and the bricks being put up, and a great many of the workers were parishioners. And my dad, who was a tailor by trade, actually mixed the mortar, and I was fascinated watching him mix the mortar because there were 2 holes in the hole that he was using, and I could not understand why that was, but I guess it facilitated the actual mixture of the mortar. But however, they stacked these bricks up on a box, and then it had a pole on the end, and they tilted it up. I don't remember the formal name for that device, but the other thing that I do remember was that Mr. Benner fell off the scaffolding and hurt his back, but he came back from it and recovered nicely, I believe. So I started going to school at the age of 5, so that would have been 1935, which meant that the new church was already up and running. So all we did was utilize the second floor for the classrooms, and the northeast corner was our library, and then the southeast corner was the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, and then the southwest corner was the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. So I started, of course, at the 1st grade at age 5, and Sister Mary Elizabeth was our teacher there, and there were probably only about 10 kids in a classroom, and we had 2 Italian boys, which was kind of interesting because everything was pretty straightforward Lithuanian at that time. My mother tells me that I never really spoke any English until I got to school, because everything in the house was Lithuanian. And then when I started my school days, I think I started answering her back in English, and they spoke to us in Lithuanian. We had the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd in the one classroom, the southeast corner, which became the museum for the Lithuanian heritage people. And then I progressed from there to the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, Sister Mary Alverna. And the biggest recollection I have there was that we celebrated the Holy Ghost at the time by stringing strings over each pew, or row of desks, and hung down cutouts of a dove, and with a long fiery tongue, and hung over our heads, you know, and that was our exposure to the Holy Spirit. So, and then the other thing I remember vividly was we had a spelling bee contest, and I won that, and it was elimination type of thing. But the other thing was that Sister Alverna had me write, "I will not turn my head in church," 350 times. I filled up every blackboard in the classroom from top to bottom with that, "I will not turn my head in church." But I think she had an ulterior motive, because I had terrible handwriting, and I have it to this day. And I don't believe that she cured me of that problem. I can show you my report card. The tuition was $1 a month, okay, and when I was in the 8th grade. And so that's the way things were. My recollection of us learning Lithuanian was devoted about an hour each day when we were in the 7th and 8th grade. And it was very formal because they discussed the cases. Like in the English language, you had 3 cases, nominative, possessive, and objective. And in Lithuanian language, I think it had like about 6 cases, and it made it very difficult. And we used to drill like o vaikas, o vaikia, o vaikai, you know, that type of thing. And in English, they used to diagram the sentences and all that. But as far as the Lithuanian, there was no mandatory speaking of the Lithuanian, but we just devoted about an hour a day. And,
was it the devotion to the Lithuanian language being taught there for all the students, or was it like an option that you would choose to go to this class?
No, it was right as we sat in our classrooms, and when it came time during the day for Lithuanian language, you just stood there and took it, and tried to absorb as much as you could.
I remember Matsunas' grill that was on the corner of Watkin Terrace and Hudson Avenue. Shiralis had an oil and coal company first, closer to Clifford Avenue. The business was in front. He lived in back.
Kanapika's Bakery.
Kanapika's Bakery. Then I remember Milavich and Gursky Meat Market that we used to go every day to get our meats on Hudson and Bernard Street.
There's all Lithuanian neighborhood on top of Hudson Avenue. As you go down towards Norton Street, it was all Polish and down there, C-stands.
And very active was Dirso's. A lot of people stopped by Dirso's bar, which later became Wisman's when Mr. Dirso retired.
Starting on the left side of Hudson Avenue, on the west side, north of the church, we had Brockner's Studio. And crossing Clifford Avenue, we had Janina's Meat Market. And a little further down, we had Morgan's Funeral Home on the corner of Alphonse Street. And then in another block, we had Joe Dirso's restaurant and grill. And further down by Berlin Street, we had Henry Milavich's butcher shop. And let's see, on the east side, across the street from the church, we had Shiralis Coal and Coke. And then on the corner of Watkin Terrace, we had Motsuna's Grill and Restaurant. And further down near the firehouse, the Engine 16, there was a barber shop there. Shukis was a barber. And just coming back a little bit, there was a Hudson Theater, and the Gedaviskas family lived just north of the Hudson Theater. And across the street, there was another barber shop there, and the Luxius family lived in behind them, but I can't remember the barbers' names, but there were 2 of them. And so there were a lot of Lithuanian businesses right along Hudson Avenue there, and they seemed to end right around Avenue D, because north of Avenue D became Polish town. And but there were a lot of Lithuanians living down there. The Belasiuses lived on Warsaw Street, and Bill Kavichus lived on, I believe, Fairbank Street. So.
What about Kanapika's Bakery?
Okay, back to Kanapika's Bakery. I forgot about them. Sure, they were a keystone item there, and I believe Mrs. Kanapikas was Polish, and Mr. Kanapikas was Lithuanian, and but their bakery was used to cook all the foods, and whenever we had banquets in the upper hall, which held about 300 people, the food was cooked in roasters, and then there would just be a whole bunch of people who come over, grab the roasters and bring them to the upstairs church hall, where the food was broken down and distributed to the tables. And that was quite a affair, all these banquets, because all the young people knew the routine. The tables were all underneath the stage, and you opened up the doors and pulled the tables out and set the tables up, and the chairs were there in racks, and we also set them up. And the younger boys like myself would run the cloakroom down in the classrooms, and we used the desks to store our customers' clothes during the winter months. And everybody pitched in and worked hard. And the bazaars, they had them around Thanksgiving, and the big things were the spinning of the wheels for winning wine. And I remember Felix Schlepatis, he was one of the easy spenders because he was a bachelor and he had a good job at Kodak. And he wound up, sometimes in frustration, he would buy the whole table and he'd say, spin the wheel because I'm going to win this bottle of wine, you know. But he wasn't lucky the other way, so he'd buy the whole board. But there was Joe Dirso, he used to buy chips by the yard from John Kazak, I think it was, the father of the Kazak family. And he'd have them hang around his neck, and he treated everybody to beers and so forth. And so we had a few people there like that spent money freely and supported these affairs. Janina Litvinas ran a dice game at the bazaars, and the prize was a live chicken. Okay, so the custodian at the time was Carajos, king, and he would go out and get the chicken out of the back shed there that was attached to St. George's and bring it in, and here the winner would be going around the rest of the evening with a chicken tucked underneath his arm. And what I did, the game consisted of throwing 3 dice 3 times, and I would quickly add up the dice and write the person's name down, and then whoever beat him, I would write that name down. So at the end of the page, the highest score won the chicken, you know. I forgot about businesses. Okay, there was North Dairy on North Street, and it was Ignas Kairis, and I can't remember the father's name, the Unitas though. And so there was Ed and Frank and Vic were the boys there, and Vic became a deacon, and Ed, he was high up in the Union and General Motors Rochester Products plant. And Frank, I'm not sure what he did, you know, but he was helpful to me when we had part of the fundraising, okay, for the church. We would have paper drives like during World War II, and we collected scrap. Well, he used the dairy truck that delivered milk normally to collect all this stuff, and people would let us know that they had paper to donate, and we would go pick it up. And but we sold the paper for $1 or 100 pounds, which is big money when you think about that. And we raised $100, and that was used to buy the knotty pine wood that was used to build the basement hall. Today it's now been painted, and but it was originally knotty pine. And as a teenager, I got the job of sanding it. The older guys put the boards up, and I wound up sanding it, and then they finished off the knotty pine. But anyhow, that was funded all by the money we raised from the paper drive. And so about $100. North Dairy delivered the milk right to your door, and we had a little carton there. It was kind of had insulation on it, had metal covering and a lid, and usually about 2 quarts at a time, and they delivered the milk and picked up the bottles that we had washed. And I remember we did have refrigeration in those days. We had ice boxes, and you hung a sign in the window. It was a triangular sign, and according to the amount of ice that you wanted, it was color-coded. The way you hung it in the window would tell the iceman how much to chop off of his block of ice and bring with his tongs into your ice box. And in the winter months, what my father did was raise the bathroom window and put in a wooden box into the window, and we could close the window, and now our milk and our perishables were kept outside on the windowsill in the bathroom. And in those days, we didn't have homogenized milk, and the cream always rose to the top. And then in the winter months, the freezing of the milk would push the cream out the top of the bottle along with the cap, you know, and it'd be sticking about 2 inches out the top of the bottle, you know. And so that's what life was like before we got a refrigerator.
I'm Jean Lauda. I'm the daughter of Connie and Dot Eismont. And I think older Lithuanians remember my dad's dairy, North Dairy.
Hi, and I'm Bev Dobney, formerly Beverly Eismont, and Connie and Dot were also my parents that owned the dairy.
My grandfather owned it with Mr. Kairos, and my thinking is, and it's only thinking, is that I would guess that my grandfather bought it from Mr. Kairos. When I was a kid, they brought the milk in by horse and wagon in cans, in big metal cans, right from the farms.
What year was that?
I would say, well, when I went to school, even when I went to school, there were horse troughs on Hudson Avenue and on North Street. So, I mean, there were still horses around at the time. So that would have been early 50s. And I don't remember when it switched to trucks, You can speak about that. But it came in big silver cans, and my dad and grandfather would put it into the pasteurizing machine, which was this great big huge tank, and then they bottled it. This was the quart bottle with a typical cap. And Bevy mentioned in her thing that you could know what the milk was by what color the cap was.
Is that a Guernsey
This
cap?
is Guernsey.
I knew it.
I know, me too. Although it doesn't say on here, it's kind of worn out. But that's how we
Yellow
knew
was
it.
homogenized, and purple was buttermilk.
Buttermilk.
Skim milk, I think, was blue, if I remember rightly, and chocolate was brown. And each cap had its own color.
Yeah.
I remember that I think when Upstate Milk started getting really big, and I think it was Upstate Milk at the time, I'm not positive, they started bringing the milk in big, huge silver liquid haulers. And it would come up to the side of the dairy and it would be pumped into a tank. And it was probably the beginning of the end when that sort of stuff happened, because then the big stores, the big grocery stores really took a chunk of the milk business away, because people would get their groceries and their milk at the same time, and they would also do cheap prices on milk to get people in the store. But I do remember it coming in great big silver haulers, and I can remember the process started at the far end of the building, where there was this huge machine that had all these little metal holders, and they would put the bottles into these holders, and they would rotate through and they would sterilize the bottles. And once that was done, they would ride along a conveyor belt around this big, and the conveyor belt would go down, and then at the end of the line, I just remember this huge metal sheet that came out of the ceiling that had, I want to say water or something coming down it, but eventually the milk came down, whatever it came down into, and then these bottles went around a round cylinder thing that the milk would be in, and they would go around the cylinder and they would get filled with the milk, and then at the very end it would get capped with the cardboard caps, and then it would run down the line again in the same direction it was going, and then somebody at the end had to take them off and put them in cases. Our poor dad had no life. He would really get up at 2 o'clock in the morning, every morning, and he would go and get the milk and put it in the trucks. In the summertime, I do remember there was ice, and he would be delivering at 2 o'clock in the morning and come back sometimes, I'm going to guess maybe 5 or 6 o'clock, and he would bottle, and then he would go back out again, and he would start delivering to the bars and the schools that were open. I just remember the real thrill of being the kid at school, and I can remember milk bottles, the little half pints used to be along the chalkboard wall, And you could either order milk, either white milk or chocolate milk. You had to order what you wanted at the beginning of the week, and the little bottles would be stacked up, and during break you would have that milk. But I was always so proud